Well, good afternoon, everybody. We are here today for one of our executive pop-up webinar series, and this one is going to be a little bit different than what we've had in the past. We do have the equivalency of a panel discussion, sort of in 3 separate interviews, and this is on solving the challenges of being an ECE business owner. One of the greatest opportunities as well as challenges we have are that for each one of us who is an owner-operator, we have so many things that are coming at us to try to manage, to grow, to develop, and make our businesses what we have as a vision and a mission for. And oftentimes there's many different roadblocks there. There's different roadblocks at different points in their lives, and there's also ways that they've gotten around that. So what we thought today is we would bring is a group of different individuals as panelists, and those individuals could give you their perspective on their story in a little bit. And I would like to make sure that you folks feel very comfortable in opening up to ask any questions they have. We're going to have a few poll questions that we will have throughout the event, but we'll also look for you folks to be asking some questions too. Some people, as we know, just come on a little bit later because everybody's coming off their last calls and what have you. But today, we'll talk about in a minute who our featured guests are. But let's go and get underway with some of the basics in our agenda today. We're obviously doing the welcoming right now. We'll go into housekeeping. We're going to talk about a few of the different elements that we have. And then we'll go into a poll. We'll speak to our guests. And then we'll have some time hopefully left over for a little bit of Q&A. But as part of what we do here, also to how to use the toolbar for Zoom in this call, we ask you that if you do have a question, to please use the Q&A function. The Q&A function is easy for us because we can either answer the questions online or answer them live. We do have the illustrious Jen Guadioso, who is joining us today, who will be looking at the questions that you guys have sent in. And if it makes sense, she'll be sort of interrupting our guests and ourselves to say that she has a question from one of you. And we greatly look forward to having that. In the chat function, if there is something that you have interest, like, hey, I would love to get connected with Geren, or I'd like to learn more about this service or what have you, please put that out in the chat. We do also have Hans and Sarah on our team who are monitoring these elements too. And we will get started with some of these other things. But outside of that, you'll have poll questions. And I think it's pretty self-explanatory when we get there for them. So just to jump in, do some of our own housekeeping. You know, a number of you have seen, but want to make sure that you're aware of Inspire University, one of really the core elements that we bring to bear at Inspire Care 360s for all of our members. Not only do you have your handbooks that are personalized for your staff, as well as family handbooks personalized for them. This is where you would also have personalized orientations for your staff when they're joining the organization and how they can actually do the orientations even prior to them coming on board. Operational procedures for all of your different programs, for all of the different age ranges, including emergency administration, access to a 120-hour CDA program for the ridiculously low rate of $199, and e-enrollment, which is coming in the near future for us, as well as currently having over 70 hours of seat time for our professional development in Inspire University. Our ECE Total Rewards relationship, which is going to start to migrate to a new name called Peak Performance, is really a performance management solution that we will be talking more about in the future months to come. And we also have your opportunity within Inspire University to have all of your content. So any content that you want to have, that you want to distribute, whether it be learning, and you want learning courses to go out, or you have videos or PDF files or anything of that nature you want to be able to distribute to your staff and or families, you can certainly do through Inspire University. And there is an e-content builder, so you can actually develop your own e-learning with the tool sets that we have that's all inclusive in the membership. And one last one is the survey engine. That all comes with it too. With that said, let's move forward. Coming up in March is our administration leadership development. We have another one of our sessions for this. This is a certified leadership program. This is a 9-week program for administration people. And the objective of this program is really to move your admin team from managers to leaders. How we do this is we really focus on teaching them the elements of how to coach and to become more of a coach as to a manager. So this is empowering your staff and giving your staff the ability to really make the kind of changes and do the things they need to do with accountability to move your organization forward. It's really to solve and support your teammates' issues, so your staff issues, so they don't all have to come to you, but you actually have empowered your admin team to be a leader in your organization, just as to managing the situations. So it's about building a culture. It's definitely something that can help reduce turnover. If you're interested in the program, the class is almost sold out. The next one is this one that we're having is coming up in March, and that's the one that's almost sold out. So definitely reach out to Jen or shoot us a chat if you are interested in learning more about the program. But it's a fantastic program, highly referenceable. So feel free to reach out to us and we'll give you any information. Without further ado, though, let's jump right on into the heart of our webinar, so we have enough time to make sure to get through all of our conversations, as well as the opportunity to have you ask any questions you would like to ask. So solving the challenges of being an ECE business owner. Today, we have 3 separate guests. We have Jerzell, Pierre-Louis, along with Geren and Scott Wayman. The reason we chose these 3 guests is because they're in different journeys within our industry. 2 of them are owner operators. Another one is a founder CEO of his own tech company that completely supports this industry. So we're going to be talking to everybody individually and asking them some questions and getting their point of view, and also trying to, again, if you have questions for them where they may have gone through something, they learned something, a nugget you could take away from this, that's fantastic. But if you have some questions for them, do not hesitate to ask in the Q&A section. So with that said, let's move forward, and I'm going to launch our very first poll question. And in our very first poll question, let's launch here. Actually, there will be 2 that will pop up. So I'm going to ask you 2 to do in a row. All right. First one is, how long have you owned and operated your own schools? So if you could go through here and start answering any of these questions and start bringing any of your questions or your answers into it, I would greatly appreciate it. This is something that will help us get a little perspective of who do we have in the audience and who are the individuals here that, what their level of tenure has been. The second poll question is, what area of your business do you find the most challenging? And please just choose 2. I have a feeling that we're going to have a lot of people really get into one of the areas, because when the economy is in a state that it is today, we oftentimes focus on one area that many people will talk about. But it's interesting to want to see the secondary areas, because those are the things that when the economy turns down or turns cool, then that happens to pop up for elements like enrollment and the like. So with that said, we're just going to give a few more minutes here to have everybody, if we can, do some of your poll questions. We have probably about 65% who have answered, and let's go ahead, and I'm going to close out the poll. So let me end the poll, and I'm going to share the results. So how long have you owned and operated your own schools? Right now, on average, it's sort of a pretty decent blend. Anywhere from the greatest amount here is over 20 years, but then there's a number of people who've really been there almost exactly the same, with 15 to 19 years, 10 to 15 years, and then a number of them that are less than 5 years. So a pretty decent split overall. What are your top challenges? We knew upfront that it was going to be staffing. We definitely wanted to put in there. But when we look at what are some of the areas, managing staff is a critical area, which is different than obviously staffing alone, but that is in obviously a close second. But then we do have meeting compliance regulations as well as financials and profitabilities. So thank you very much for answering those poll questions. And we're going to move forward with our very first guest. So I'd ask her to pop on. Jerzell, if you don't mind coming off your video and your video lockdown, I'd say, and your audio. How are you doing today?
I'm wonderful. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us again.
And thank you for having me.
Great. It says we talk as if Giselle and myself didn't talk before this, but we're doing this for your sake, folks. So Giselle, do us a favor. Tell us just a little bit up front, just a brief of your school and also how did you get into this industry?
So I owned Sprout Early Education Center as well as Bloom Early Education Center. Bloom is my second center. Really love what I do, passionate about the work that we're doing here in Columbus. But my story in terms of early childhood education is not fantastic. In 2013, I was fired from a job where I served as chief of staff. And, the old adage, you have to do the right thing when no one's looking. Well, that's what I did. I supported a young lady who said she was being sexually harassed, went through the process, and because of that, I was fired. So,
Wow.
yeah. So at that point, I decided to take a chance on me and follow my passion for early childhood education. And here I am 9 years later.
Well, it's sort of obviously, it was obviously an issue that at the time that must have made your heart drop for the effort you put in to find out the results of it, that you were terminated. And then you decided to make a bet on yourself. Tell us a little bit about sort of like that turning point when you decided it was, you're done sort of like waiting on other people and you're going to just take yourself to the next level.
Well, I'm an educator by nature. I have all of my studies have been in education, but just really wasn't ready to take a chance on myself. And I would always go back to, if something were to happen or if I were to retire, this is what I would do, early childhood education. Well, sometimes a traumatic experience propels you into your purpose, right?
Yeah.
And so this was the moment I said, I'm moving in this direction, and I have the ability to create a culture of respect, integrity, and safety for not only my families, but for my employees. Because, going through that, I knew what that felt like, not being protected, not being safe, not feeling, being in an integrous place. And so, I think I've done that so far in creating that culture, but it was very difficult not to have a job, not to have the income coming in. And I found a space and I asked the owner to take a chance. She did, and here we are 9 years later with 2 schools.
So that's fantastic. Now, did you join existing schools or did you come in and buy into schools or did you start them yourself?
I started my own brand, started from the ground up. Yeah.
That's wonderful. And when you were doing that, there's a number of people who, show that they've been here for 20 years in the industry and they might remember back then. But to you, what was the most important thing when you were starting up?
The most important thing when I was starting up was making sure that I had all the licensing pieces together, making sure I was following the rules. Because I was doing a little bit of everything. I really wasn't focused on marketing. I really wasn't focusing on my finances. I was just trying to get the kids in the door and provide the service. But as I've grown, and I've worn multiple hats, I know that there are other pieces to that have to be developed as well.
Yeah. And through your journey here that you've had, what would you say are the top the biggest challenges, the biggest rocks you've had to crack, through your journey here that you're like, well, I really didn't see this coming, but I really spent way more time on this than I thought I would have to, or I had to even develop myself here. What were those things?
I would say understanding the financial aspect of the business. Um, I knew I had the expertise in terms of educating the children based on my background, but not understanding the financial implications fully and how to budget appropriately and how to move forward with projections and some of the pitfalls that I should be looking for, and even how to raise prices, right? And so that was definitely a learning curve for me.
So let's talk a little bit of that, about that last one there about raising prices, because it just sounds meaty. Let's jump into that a little bit. So I can probably assume, but I would assume that you were probably very tentative about any kind of increases for a while, but then you obviously either learned something, heard something, or just made decisions to sort of move on your pricing. And what was it that you experienced when you started changing your pricing and started asking for what you were probably worth?
That was a very difficult ask for me, as I'm sure a lot of us go through that experience. What I found was people didn't have a problem paying if you're providing good service. If their children are safe and they feel comfortable. I've never had anyone ask me to change my prices because we're providing quality service. So that was a learning experience for me. And then because I increased my prices, I was able to find better staff members. I could increase their benefits and provide more for them in order to care for the kids. And so increasing prices just allows you overall to provide better service to your internal customers as well as your external customers.
Absolutely. So just to get really into the dirt with it a bit, when you are doing a price increase, what are the things that you evaluate, and then how do you communicate it to your families?
I evaluate what's happening in the market. I take a look at my competitors, what their pricing is, if they've increased prices. I look at any special projects that we're planning for. I look at, the state guidelines, if they're requiring all of our teachers to become CDA certified, what is the cost to that? For that. And so how do I add that into my budget in order to support my teachers with their education? So hiring a good accountant is important as well, because, we look at all the facets of where are we currently, what are we projecting, and what pricing increase is needed in order to accommodate that, as well as if I'm adding any new roles.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because you started with the fact that finance was not your forte really, but it seems like you've really grown to that needs to be your forte in running this operation.
It does. When I started, I would meet with my accountant once a year. Now I meet with my accountant twice a month.
Twice a month. Listen to that. That's awesome. Sounds like you have a great relationship though with them too, where they're engaged, and how well do you think they understand your business, your accountant?
Very well. I needed someone that I could call up. I needed someone who understood my goals, not just my taxes. I knew someone who could help me project, help me stay on budget. And I knew someone who could help me grow. So she is in-depthly a part of my business. And again, that's not my area of expertise. So I had to find someone who could support me.
So that's fantastic though, that you found a key partner like that. I know that I found a bookkeeper like that. So she's been amazing for me. But my accountant, even though I use our financial experts, I always could spend more time with them because they really got their stuff together. So let me go into a separate line of questioning, and that is a little bit about adversity. Through your career of being an entrepreneur, starting from the ground up, making these schools what you've wanted to, what have been probably the biggest or any number of them, adversity or adversarial issues that have come up that have really made you take a deep breath and go, really, should I be in this? And should I continue to do this? Because I know as entrepreneurs, we all go through that question.
I would say the biggest challenge for me has been staffing.
Yeah.
Not so much as having staff, but growing and developing staff and having them to see the vision that I have for my business. So, in this space and in growing 9 years, I'm not always right. I make a lot of mistakes. But what has been advantageous for me is folk who come through the door or who've been with me for a number of years, understanding the vision, being on board with the vision I have for Sprout and for Bloom, supporting me as I support their dreams and their goals. That has probably been the biggest adversity that I faced outside of COVID.
Yeah.
Outside of COVID is staffing. My staff has been with me now on average for 4 years. And so I think that starting off, working on that culture is very important for people to buy into your vision, as well as it's important for you to support them in their personal visions.
Yeah, well, I greatly appreciate that. And, we all have been challenged a lot with staffing, but if you look at yourself when you first started to how you worked with your staff then as to how you work with your staff now, what would you say is the biggest difference in how you manage and look at your staff?
I develop leaders. When I first started, they were employees. But now I develop leaders with my organization. They all have, outside of teaching the children, they have other responsibilities. I have a leadership team. There's a great amount of respect and trust that I have for them and vice versa. I share my vision with them, whereas before I didn't as much, just to keep us all on the same page. So I would say that I matured as an owner, because that is a maturation process for an entrepreneur, because you think you know it all, but really just sitting down, listening, and developing myself as a leader, as well as developing them as leaders.
And how did you get to that with them? Like, what was your how did you develop yourself as a leader, I guess, and then realize that you really need to pass this on?
Being around like-minded people has been a game changer for me. Being part of groups and coaching, I would say that as an entrepreneur, whatever field you in, it's always good to have a good coach, because they can see your blind spots when you can't. And so that's been valuable, being around like-minded people, reading podcasts, listening to other experts in the field. And so as I develop my mindset and as I matured as an entrepreneur, I pass that along to my leaders.
Fantastic. Well, great. Is there anything that you had, just really one more question for yourself before we move on, but is there any things that you have really learned through your time, as being an entrepreneur, whether it was directly related exactly to the childcare field or just being an entrepreneur, that, if you were able to educate your earlier self, back when you were starting and saying, I would recommend highly that you do this and focus on this, what would those nuggets of wisdom be?
I would have to go back to something that I mentioned earlier. hire a great working accountant. That is key. No matter what stage of your business you're in. I think that for me, that has made a tremendous difference in my business. I would also say developing a leadership team within your business. Again, this is applicable to whatever field you're in because you need that support and you need their voice. In addition to that, I would say self-care is important in really putting yourself in a place of a growth mindset.
Yeah, when you say self-care, are you talking about sort of pay yourself first, or what are you talking about self-care?
That too. I wasn't doing that for the first 5 years. I was working a job.
Yeah, absolutely.
So having a good accountant will help you make a plan for that.
Absolutely. Well, that's wonderful. Well, Giselle, thank you so much. What I'm going to recommend to everybody is if you have any questions directly for Giselle, use the Q&A. And Giselle, if you don't mind just taking a look when you go offline here, and then look at if anybody has any Q&A questions for you, because I know that people may have some questions distinctly for you. If not, if we get any after this event, we'll be sure to send them on to you. And I know that Giselle, you're highly responsive to us. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
No problem. So thanks, Giselle. And as Giselle goes up, we're going to do another poll question before we actually ask Geren to join us. So let's get to the next poll question here. All right. And we're going to launch it. And there's 2 questions in here. So the first question is, how do you currently fund your schools? Are you self-sufficient, no loans or outside money? Do you have bank loans, investor equity in the business where you've given away part of the business? And the second question is, in 2021, not 2020, where are you as to capacity? Are you, below 50%? Are you 50 to 60%? Are you 60 to 70%, 70 to 80, 80 to 90? You're at 100% and you've got a solid wait list, that's a mile long. I'd be surprised if you all have that. That would be fantastic. But I also know too that staffing is by far and away the biggest burden. So with that, let's give it just a couple more minutes. I'd like to have everybody answer if at all possible. And we are going to be closing the polls in probably about 5 more seconds. While we're doing that, I hope you guys fully appreciated the opportunity of what we had with Jerzell and what she was able to add as her perspective. I love hearing her perspectives, as well as summarizing some of the things that she said, from her taking chances to the traumatic initial experience where she decided to take her career into her own hand. Understanding the financials was obviously huge for her. And she definitely felt like when it came to the elements like raising rates and things of that nature, which were adversarial at first for her, she saw them as an opportunity that allowed her to grow and expand. And then finally is really allowing her staff to have a solid understanding of the vision and the mission of her organization. With that said, we're going to close out our poll right now, and let's end the poll. And I'm going to share the results. So how do you currently fund your schools? Well, luckily 64% right now are in a situation where they have funded themselves, no outside money, which is great. There's some who have bank loans, and there's 1 or 2 that have equity investors. And then on top of it, where are you to capacity? 60 to 70% is about what I have seen across the marketplace average. So you guys are pretty much on target with what we've seen in the marketplace. There are some who are a little lower, and there are definitely some that are a little higher. We at my schools are right now between 75 and 82%, depending on the school, of the 3 schools that I have. So with that said, I'm going to bring on our next guest. And our next guest is the co-founder of the Pillars Christian Learning Center. So if I could have you join us and jump on board, Geren, coming off video and audio. How are you doing today?
Hey, good, Tony. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Is that a TV in the back? No, I'm just kidding. We just gave him a hard time right before this. He
What are
said,
you
"Something's
talking about?
exactly. I have no idea." So we're very lucky to have our, member of ours, but also a friend of ours too, Geren, who I had a chance to actually meet, I think one time down in Austin at an event. And I think that's where you live, correct?
San Antonio. Yeah, just south of
Yeah,
Austin.
there you go. San Antonio. That's right. Close enough though, for me being out of New York. But how are you doing today? How's everything going for you and Melissa? Melissa is obviously your co-founder, your wife.
She is. Thank you for bringing that up. And because I don't want that to go unsaid. So this has been Melissa and I's, my beautiful, super intelligent wife, Melissa's journey for almost 13 years. And uh, we didn't come from the industry. So we had a little unusual path getting here, but it's going great. Certainly, like everybody, we're glad to hopefully seeing COVID in the rearview mirror. But like most challenges, certainly, you wish you didn't have a lot of it, but some of it you wouldn't want to have missed because of everything that we learned along the way.
So did you pretty much join Melissa as she started on the journey, or was it the two of you who founded and started this together?
Yeah, so it was it was a little bit neither. So we we had owned a couple of franchised businesses earlier prior to our childcare journey, but very much our first step into entrepreneurship or business ownership ourselves. And it didn't go well. It was a challenge. It was just a grind for 7 years. And finally, we just kind of realized, okay, at some point you have to realize that we have a thing. This must not be it. And we didn't know what that thing was. But we knew that it was time to close this chapter, which was tough. It was kind of waving the white flag a little bit, that hey, we're gonna, this is waving the white flag, giving up, not giving up, but just moving on and closing that chapter. And if you're competitive, and which most people probably listening here are, that's a tough pill to swallow. It's a tough decision to make. So we were with some brokers trying to figure out how we were going to sell this thing, and Melissa, she's probably on pins and needles telling how much detail I'm going to give to this story, but she had to go to the ladies' room before we got on the road back home. And so while we were there, I was just talking to these guys, these brokers. I was like, hey, got anything really cool you're trying to buy or sell, or just killing time, while I was waiting Melissa so we could get on the road and head back home. And they were like, man, we've got one of the coolest things we've seen in 30 years, and started telling us about this childcare that was for sale. The childcare business on the west side of town that was for sale. These older couple who wanted to retire, and she gets back from back in. She's like, "All right, let's hit the road." And I was like, "Hold up, you got to hear about this." And she was like, "You lost your blanking mind." And so next thing you know, about 9 months later, we were childcare owners, and still hadn't sold the other albatross that we were trying to sell yet.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so there's a lot to unpack there in our, I say our, Melissa's, I won't drag her down with me, but a lot of that was why we made some of those decisions and when it could be debated.
Well, let me ask you this, you mentioned something there, but I think it's germane to this conversation we're having. You owned a different franchise. You were a franchisee, right? You were not the franchisor. You were the recipient on the franchisee side.
Right.
And it wasn't working for you. We don't need to get into the business or the business name itself, but if we don't mind, what wasn't working for you with it? What was just not coming together? Because this is being an entrepreneur, right? And you guys were being entrepreneurs, even though you were using the support of a back office of a franchisor.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So I think a couple of things is, and I'll have the grand finale at the end, but I don't think we understood our market. We understood what the franchise, what the business what it was geared towards, and we wanted to deliver that to our market, not the other way around. Is this something that our market really needs and will embrace and accept? And then you get into parts, when you stand up something like that, much like anybody who's growing in the childcare space, you just can't go put one up anywhere. Because, hey, I'm gonna go put one up over here because rent's cheap. When you talk about it in childcare reference, in frame of reference, that makes no sense. That's essentially what we did. We said, hey, rent is cheap, so let's go there. And it was just rookie mistakes and like that. And that really, I mean, it's cliche, but things that we learned very, very valuable lessons from. And we learned not to get over leveraged. We weren't in a position to do some of the things that we were doing. So you can always, I'm always a fan. I always say, hey man, I'm exceptional at pulling off the impossible. But you know what? A lot of times the impossible is impossible for a reason. And sometimes you don't need to pull off that impossible when things get so hard and complex. You need to step back and go, okay, am I missing something? Is there a reason this is so hard and complex? Sometimes not, man. Sometimes, figure it out and power through. Sometimes it's because you're getting yourself into a situation you don't need to be into. And that was a big part of it.
Well, and I would, something you said earlier sort of just, it made my hair stand up a little bit where you said, we gave up. Realistically, though, I'm going to maybe characterize it slightly different and see if you agree. Or did you pivot? When you realized something wasn't working and really couldn't work, did you decide to go in a different direction to something you felt had from what you learned and you experienced? Could be a much more satisfying, thing for the both of you.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Tony. I don't think we knew what we were pivoting to. Now, it's easy to say we made the decision to pivot, or sometimes, like during COVID, you pivot because you have to.
Yeah.
And we were getting to a position where we were pivoting because we had to pivot, or bad things were going to happen to us.
Right.
And which is every business owner's nightmare of getting locked out of the place you're renting because you can't pay your rent, or not losing your the landlord coming after you for every penny, or all those bad things. At some point you have to go, okay, I've got to pivot because I have to accept reality. I have to pivot to something else and accept I have a path, but this wasn't it, and you need to pivot. But sometimes I agree with you. I think some people get themselves into trouble because they don't want to accept that, hey, the path we're going down is not good, and we got to figure out a different path in a hurry, or things are going to go so sideways that it's going to be hard to get back.
So using that experience of what you had from owning owning the franchise and then sort of divesting of that and then starting your own. And I'm going to ask you sort of a too hard a question. One, tell us a little bit about what you have now, what you and Melissa have built now. But two is, what are the lessons learned that you had through that experience of what you previously owned as to what you've applied in a different way to be successful in what you're doing today?
Yeah. So, a couple of things. I think we understand how to go about, for one thing, so with the Pillars Christian Learning Center, we have 8 locations now in San Antonio and Dallas Fort Worth area. We obviously started with one back in 2009. Some of the things that we've learned are, there's nothing wrong with bank loans. There's nothing wrong with equity investment. There's nothing wrong with these places to get money. Actually, funding is a huge challenge for anybody trying to grow. If that's up there at the top of the list, has got to pay for it. And childcare is not cheap. It takes a lot of money. I think the balance that we learned from our prior experience and carried into this one is you just need to be patient and make sure you can pull off the impossible. You can go get that SBA loan. You can get, and guess what? You're going to rent this space that the landlord's going to give you a bunch of TI money. And hey, that sounds fantastic up front, except yeah, he wants to get paid back. So now your rent just went up by 20 or 25%, and you've got that SBA loan. And you actually, your startup costs are 10 or 15% higher than you thought because there was just a bunch of stuff you didn't, anticipate. So now you've got to go get another, CDLF loan on that. And now you're looking at in a position where your margins and your wiggle room for error is so small that it's a hard way to, it's a hard way to live. What we have learned is if that's the scenario that it's going to take to stand up a center, then really consider that. Really consider waiting a little bit, being a little more patient until you have a little more comfort that you're going to have some margin to happen, for things like COVID, things like that.
So one of the areas that I think that has been impressive what you guys have done is you've been on a growth path, and the growth path has been allowing you to evaluate and look at, starting things from either the ground up or buying other schools or the like. Being on a growth path, what have sort of been your lessons learned, and is it working according to the plan that you set out on?
Yeah, I mean, we've learned a lot. I think, one big lesson is, people ask me a lot, we go to conferences. I love talking with guys like you, with guys like Scott, guys who are just industry guys who get exposure. I love talking to other companies that are bigger than us, that, are doing now what we're trying to do. There's no one way to do anything. And I think that's a trap you get into up front is I'm going to buy all my real estate, or I'm going to rent all my real estate, or I'm going to do this. When the reality is you really need to be flexible and understand where you're at in any given period of time, and know you have all kinds of options and you're not hamstrung to or tied to any one option. And your exit plan kind of dictates that, Melissa and I, we maybe want to do this 10 more years. That's different. So our strategies look different than somebody who wants to be in for another 20, 25 years. That just has, you have different options, available to you. But the one thing is that, it's not a sprint. It doesn't have to be a sprint. A sprint, oftentimes, in my case, I'm not a patient guy. The sprint is what will get you in trouble oftentimes. Embrace the process, embrace the journey, embrace that it's a marathon, not a sprint. Embrace your failures. Like I'm very candid. I got this that we don't have enough time in 5 of these webinars for me to share all the failures that we we have learned from, and just get good people around you to help you. I wish we would have done that sooner, as gotten some of the people that we have now helping us, good people doing fewer things better. I wish we would have done that a lot sooner.
Yeah, and I think we're finding out that really is the key. That is the secret sauce, is really surrounding yourself with good people, solid people. Sometimes you don't even know what that person looks like though at first. But, I love the idea when you say it's a sprint, because oftentimes I say with my staff members even too, when they're getting like ridden with anxiety or whatever because of something's going on, I'm like, listen, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. We're going to figure this out. We'll be able to leave it tonight. We can come back to it tomorrow. But Geren, I want to truly thank you for the time you spent on here. I went by super quick, and I'd like to go through another poll question or two. But if anybody has any questions for Geren, please pop them into the Q&A. Geren and Melissa have done a great job. When Geren retires, I'm sure he'll be in his 60s in 10 years, and Melissa will be in her early 30s, I'm sure. But with that said, I have tremendous respect for the two of these individuals too, like I do with Jerzell, and what they've been able to do with their organization. So thank you so much for attending this with us.
Yeah, I had a great time. Thanks for including me, Tony. I appreciate it.
No problem at all. Thanks so much. And we're going to move on to our next poll question, or our last poll question, I should say. And that is, let's see here. All right, this last one, there's a little bit of length to it, so you can do multiple choice on it. We're going to launch it, and this is, where do you believe automation belongs in managing your business? Childcare management software, CRM, should you be automating your ads or your social media, your parent engagements maybe, and how you communicate with your parents, as well as staff and learning, payroll, accounting, and hey, I don't need everybody out there going and just choosing every single one of these. Let's try to choose just a few of the top ones now. But when it comes to automation, form management, performance management. And then, the last one we really have is we are predominantly paper and pen only business today. And we really want to focus on being paper, pen only business. So I'm going to continue to allow you to answer this question a little bit before I bring Scott on, but just as a little bit of a review with what Geren talked about. Geren was really talking about the fact that first, they really struggled with the business that they were coming out of, and they really did have to pivot. They sort of felt like they're giving up on one, but saw just such a bright opportunity with another. They really didn't feel like they fully understood the marketplace, the location they were at, and things of that nature that really translate dramatically to our business too, because our business are all about demographics. And they now have about 8 locations, that they've developed since 2009. And they believe that there's all types of ways to get funding and focus on that. So whether they're looking at equity investors or whether they're looking at bank loans, it's doing it, but also making sure you understand how that adds up. Very similar to Jerzell in what she's looking at for how she looks at budgeting. You could hear that a common theme with what Geren's saying to expand and grow the way they are. And he's also looking at different influencers out there that maybe that those influencers can give some sage wisdom. Doesn't mean that they're going to do it the same way, but there's always an opportunity to learn from some peers and also to be flexible and definitely to know where you're at. So with that said, I'm going to end this poll. I'm going to share the results. And what we have is, big one up top is childcare management at 70% is probably the dominating one, but close behind, we actually have payroll, which is not surprising. Forms management, that actually is very interesting. That is really sort of taking all your forms and looking to possibly automate that. And then there's a number of different learnings that we have out here too of what is important. So I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to ask my friend Scott Wayman to come on board. And Scott, how are you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing good. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm just so busy. I had to read a book while, during the webinar, I was paying attention. Hey, Mr. Cabana, so don't bring any drinks, okay? I'm good for the next 5.
Okay, the comedy show is later tonight, but I do believe.
Okay, yeah. No, Tony, I'm happy to be here. And in real life, no, this is what it's all about. There's no beach. I'm not like. Are you on the beach, by the way? Is that what that's covering up behind you?
I'm close to it, but I did see a sunrise and a moonset all at the same time this morning. So.
Yes, yeah, I'm in Long Beach.
Okay, so you are near a beach. So anyhow, well, Scott, thanks for joining us. We're taking a slight pivot here because though you are a solution provider like Inspire Care 360 is, what I've always enjoyed about our conversations is your entrepreneurial ability. You started off doing one other complete gig, bringing another business completely to market, and then you moved out of that, and then you got into Kangarootime, and then you started this. Tell us a little bit, we have, I know you and I could go on for a long time, but in a brief nutshell, your previous life as to what you learned there, as to what started you with Kangarootime and sort of the why. What did you really get out of this?
Yeah, so of course, I feel like I'm with kindred spirits right now. Tony, you and I have had a number of conversations. I know I have a relationship. I've met Kim, I've met Melissa. Hello. Nadery has been our biggest supporter from day one. But bottom line, it's been amazing to work with passionate entrepreneurs that really understand their why, that are in this business not because they want anything more than to just do something fulfilling and to work with people that they really love and serve families that they really care about. Yeah, my history is interesting. I graduated college in 1997. Don't know how that happened. I played football, so I think there was some preference there. I come from a really interesting family. I have 23 siblings. I adopted my youngest brother. I put him into childcare, and really got to know the owners at his center. Tony, like you, he was as it was a younger guy that got into childcare after a long history in corporate America. And I know Natery's story. I know a few of your stories, and it was interesting to hear Jerzell's story too. Same thing. You just kind of got pushed around in the world of corporate America, or in what you thought you were supposed to do after college, and then you go into a business. And then, lucky for us, we all choose this business where there's like this level of altruism, and you're serving people, and you're making an impact on the greater good, and what each dollar spent into early education can mean to people's futures. And then you get into building a business around people too. But yeah, I got the bug in 2007. Spent a year in spent about a decade in corporate America. Promoted really fast. Was really kind of like a great soldier. And then like Jerzell, just got burned. Just kind of got burned, and decided I'd really like to start my own business. I feel like I've been triangulating and building skills to start my own business. Med streaming came about, grew really fast. We built EMR, so electronic medical records for big health systems. We were kind of well known because we didn't have a whole lot of business, and we walked into Johns Hopkins and kind of did a whiteboard session with them, and they gave us a large deal. And it changed our lives. And we went on this crazy run for about 7 years, with smoke coming out of our ears. And I was not the single founder. My dream was to go and do my own thing. Prior to that, had helped my brother / son's center, adopted my youngest brother, spin up software with off the counter, or kind of software back in the day when you could go to Circuit City and grab the disk and load a computer, but became really passionate about it, but learned a ton of lessons along the way.
Yeah, and when you think about the kind of lessons that you learned in being an entrepreneur, and I would say, obviously, for you being sort of a little bit of a serial entrepreneur, that you see one opportunity, you grab onto and move on to another one. What would you coalesce around, or maybe some of the biggest lessons learned that you've had when it's come to taking challenges and going into an area where no one has either really done it or done it right before? And you're now trying to go into new ground. This is something I've had to deal with, both with my schools as well as Inspire Care 360. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think so when we hit the market, interestingly, Brightwheel hit about the same time we did, and you and I have talked about it. They were the darlings of Silicon Valley. They went on Shark Tank, and they started raising all of this money, and we would build our models out and just dream about what we could do with $100 million in venture capital money. I think the realization we had as a team was that there's a cadence to building a really strong business with great fundamentals, and then there's a design methodology and a team construction that takes time, and something that we were betting on. Our team construction started and stopped with how we designed the platform and looked at every pixel. And we wanted to invest in subject matter experts. So was that the normal playbook for a venture funded Silicon Valley company? No, that was crazy. They were telling us, go hire somebody from Service Titan or MindBody, or from one of the social giants like Facebook. Go get a project manager and just scale. Who cares about the customer experience? Get the right expertise. So So we were a bit stubborn. And I think the number one lesson was there's a cadence, right? You have to build, if you're going to build something beautiful, you have to have the right foundation laid. You have to have the right fundamentals in place. You have to have the right objectives and key result framework. You have to have OKR framework. And there's a depth to building something that's enduring, right? Like you can't just go roll out the Pillars playbook. And by the way, I'm offended, Tony. You said that San Antonio and Austin were basically the same thing. Come on, man. That's like saying Rochester and Buffalo are basically the same thing. That's offensive. That's offensive, and I'm offended for Geren and Melissa for you for saying that.
But keep on going.
Okay. But yeah, again, building something beautiful is really hard, and it takes a really thoughtful design.
Yeah, well, one of the areas that you said it was about team construction and design. I know that in the worlds that I have been in, there isn't, when you do have investors, which there may be out there childcare owners who are considering investors to grow. And investors are obviously different than a bank. A bank, they're lending you out money, they're expecting terms to be met. And they're pretty much, for the most part, going to let you do what you need to do with that as long as you meet their terms. Experience in having worked with investors. So let's say that out there, we're talking to people who would like to grow from their 3 locations, their 5 locations, maybe even their 15 or 20 locations, and they would like to double or quadruple the size. And they're like going towards private equity or maybe even some micro venture, things of that nature. What is your thought of when you bring in other players into your concept and you founding and running your organization? What really needs to go through your mind?
Tony, this is something that I've evolved with throughout my career. So I've officially been an entrepreneur since 2007. Made that crazy transition to where my wife was like, okay, mom and dad, I'm married to this happy wanderer, just useless person that doesn't get a salary anymore. So I think the optics change, right? As I've evolved, I've learned about a sense of urgency and what capital and the right partners can do to accelerate your vision and your goals. I've also learned about boundaries and understanding what capital partners will allow you to kind of be the independent driver of the business. My capital partners right now, they want to put money in. They want a multiple on their money in a certain number of years time horizon. And my narrative to them is always, I've done it before. I've doubled businesses year over year over year. So give me the money. You go sit on the beach with Tony, and I'll go make it work. Now, bringing investors in and smart money, people that can help you recruit the best people that can help you navigate through real estate, and apply more leverage and grow faster. I'm a big fan. But if there ever is a concern about losing control or not being able to play out my vision, you've picked the wrong partner. And I think in certain businesses, like inside of a tech startup, your time horizon to get to the top of the mountain, it's so small, right? So you need every accelerant you can get, every dollar you can bring into the business. And then Tony, you've been in real estate. I mean, I think I've learned throughout my real estate investment career that, leverage is just one beautiful wealth building tool. I think that leverage can also be a great organizational tool to grow and really scale up your business and bring on the right people. I'll give you an example. So, last year we grew our revenues 10x, which was incredible. We started to really partner with almost every larger brand or the early education space in the US and Australia. Our Australian business started growing really fast. what that meant for us was we could go to the market and get really cheap capital, capital that was almost, in my opinion, free. And then the models, we could put that capital to work and hire the best people. And we started hiring people that I could have never imagined that we would have access to, people that were at one time mentors and advisors. And then all of a sudden I'm saying, you know what, why don't you just do this full time? You can help us grow portions of the business, and I can actually afford you because I've raised capital. And then their value is so accretive to the business. The capital dilution that we've taken is just, it's a nothing burger. Like, it's nothing. I'm so glad I had the leverage.
So let me ask you, just because we're at the end of our time here too, but so take that and scale that down a little bit, because I think, especially with what you're obviously trying to do, you're trying to grow something, at a pretty rapid speed, and a little bit different than what like Geren was talking about on sort of, it's a marathon as to a sprint. You have a little bit of a different time window because of a very logical approach that you're saying, and that is because of where you're going after. You sort of have to get there first. It's no value in ending up 7th at that same location. But if you were to scale that down for our audience a little bit, when you're talking about leveraging and getting the right people on board, one of the things you said up front is team construction. And I think that's really important. This is a theme we heard through everything here. So sort of like the last piece of it, when it's come to you hiring and recruiting, what has been the main focus of what you've been looking for to bring on the right team members?
Tony, this has been a complete and total transition over the last 18 months for me, because there was a time when Kangarootime was me. I did every single demo. I walked everybody through their issues. If we had a customer onboarding, I was part of it. So I've had to shift to servant leadership and becoming, the upside down pyramid. So I'm at the very bottom. All the weight and pressure is on me. My job is just to block and tackle and make sure that the smart people that I hire have the ability to, and the tooling that they need. Above and beyond that, my job now, and Tony, I think you've been in this mode for a long time. I'm a recruiter. I have 3 jobs. 1, set the vision. 2, capitalize the company, make sure we have enough money. And then 3 is go find the best people on the planet. I think, there's obviously the thesis around, pay yourself first, and self-health, quantified health and everything. But I think today's millennial wants to be a part of an organization where they know that there's servant leadership in place, where the leaders have a thesis around eating last, and really enabling people to come in and do a great job and grow their careers. But yeah, it's been a huge shift, and a big part of that has been the stage of life. Another book, Tony, a suggestion I have for anybody to read. There's a book that was suggested to me. I read it a few months back. It's called The Messy Middle, and it's about that transition from early days, or kind of your early, upstart business, to, where Geren is right now, to where he's hit scale. They seem to be opening up a center every quarter, and they're really growing, and their playbook is amazing. And how the people in that business change. And it is your job to understand the psychology of your growing organization and make people, give people the fulfillment they need to grow and stay around. Or the bad part of it is sometimes you have to move on.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate the insights on that. And The Messy Middle, you don't happen to know the author on that, do you, off the top of your head? If not, we can send it out to the group.
Yeah, let's send it out.
But and Scott, I appreciate it. Unfortunately, we're out of time, but this has been fantastic. I want to make sure you get some beach time today to get your toes in the sand.
Oh yeah,
it's a good thing. The one thing, if you guys do not recognize, is Scott and myself give each other crap every time we see each other, but we love each other as brothers. So I'm very happy to see that he is down the road as part of the Rochester suburb of Buffalo. So with that said, seriously, thank you so much, Scott. Everything you've said has been very helpful. And I do greatly appreciate it for the fact that we've had Jerzell on, we've had Geren, we've had Scott, and if you guys don't know Scott and Kangarootime, definitely give those guys a look. They're a partner of ours, but the reason that they're partners are because we trust them. We trust that they can get accomplished what they say they can get accomplished, and they're doing some really cutting edge things over there that have just been fantastic for both independent little shops, but the industry overall. So definitely give Scott and team a look because they are really doing some good stuff. But with that all said, hopefully you have found this session enlightening. For me, I have too, because it's always wonderful to learn from others and to get a really good sense of what is important and what were those transitional points from Jerzell and how she had her initial transitional point that made her say, hey, listen, I'm not going to be chief of staff anymore, I guess, and I'm going to move and do my own thing, to Geren and Melissa, who really looked at coming out of the wake of having a business that they didn't feel was successful and decided they had to pivot and move on to something else, to Scott, who has really sort of taken that where he was part of corporate America. He went in and he did his first venture with some partners and was hoping to see if he could do it himself, and has been proving that he can do it himself. So entrepreneurism, there is a lot to be learned, but the one thing I have to say for you folks is take a deep breath. Take a deep breath. Every day is a little different. Sometimes it's difficult. Sometimes it's easy, but for the most part, it's usually difficult. And sometimes you wonder, am I really doing the right thing? Am I spending the right time? Should I get out of this business now, or should I wait a little bit longer? Yes, you're the only one who can answer those questions, but there's a lot of sage wisdom that resides in the people all within our child care community. And do not hesitate to reach out. I think you see here that a lot of people are willing to pick up the phone and talk with you. I know that I certainly am. So again, thanking you for the sake of having the opportunity to speak with Jerzell, Geren, and Scott. This is Tony D'Agostino with Inspired Care 360. And I'd like to thank you all very much for attending. So have a wonderful day, wonderful afternoon. Take care, everybody. Bye now.